The Rise and Fall of Nazi Germany. Introduction. How did one of the world's most educated and industrialized nations fall under the control of a dictatorship that would plunge humanity into the deadliest war in history? In just 12 years, Nazi Germany rose from economic collapse to become Europe's most powerful military force. Millions celebrated its early successes, while millions of others became victims of one of history's darkest regimes. At its height, the Third Reich controlled much of Europe, yet only a few years later, it lay in ruins, its cities destroyed, its leaders dead, and its empire erased from the map. This is the story of how Nazi Germany rose to power, and how it ultimately destroyed itself. Chapter 1. Germany. After World War I. When World War I ended in November 1918, Germany faced one of the greatest crises in its history. After 4 years of brutal fighting, the German Empire collapsed. Kaiser Wilhelm II abdicated. The monarchy came to an end, and a new democratic government, known as the Weimar Republic, struggled to take control of a nation devastated by war. The challenges facing Germany were enormous. Millions of soldiers returned home to find little work and few opportunities. Food shortages, political violence, and social unrest spread across the country. But the greatest blow came in 1919 with the signing of the Treaty of Versailles. To many Germans, the treaty was not a peace agreement. It was a national humiliation. Germany was forced to accept responsibility for the war, surrender territory, drastically reduce the size of its military, and pay massive reparations to the victorious Allied powers. Many Germans believed these conditions were unfair and blamed the new democratic government for accepting them. As resentment grew, the country's economy began to collapse. By 1923, Germany was experiencing one of the worst cases of hyperinflation in modern history. Prices increased so rapidly that money became almost worthless. Workers were paid several times a day because their wages could lose value within hours. Families carried baskets full of banknotes just to buy a loaf of bread. Many people watched their life savings disappear almost overnight. Although the economy temporarily recovered during the late 1920s, disaster struck once again when the Great Depression began in 1929. Businesses closed across Germany, banks failed, factories shut down, millions of people lost their jobs, and unemployment reached levels never seen before. For ordinary citizens, faith in democracy began to disappear. People wanted strong leadership. They wanted someone who promised stability, economic recovery, and national pride. That man was Adolf Hitler. Hitler had served as a soldier during World War I and later joined a small political movement known as the National Socialist German Workers' Party, better known as the Nazi Party. An excellent public speaker, he attracted large crowds by blaming Germany's problems on the Treaty of Versailles. Political opponents and minority groups, especially Jewish people, who were falsely accused of causing the nation's decline. His speeches were emotional, confident, and carefully designed to appeal to people who felt angry, humiliated, and hopeless. The Nazi Party also understood something many other political movements did not: the power of modern propaganda. They filled cities with posters, organized massive rallies, used newspapers and radio broadcasts to spread their message, and presented Hitler as the only man capable of restoring Germany's greatness. As economic conditions worsened, support for the Nazis grew rapidly. In the elections of the early 1930s, The Nazi Party became the largest political party in Germany. Although Hitler did not win absolute power through an election alone, political instability and negotiations among conservative leaders led to his appointment as Chancellor on January 30th, 1933. Many politicians believed they could control him. They were wrong. Only weeks later, a fire destroyed the German parliament building, known as the Reichstag. The Nazi government blamed communist opponents and used the crisis to convince President Paul von Hindenburg to approve emergency measures that suspended many civil liberties. Political opponents were arrested. Freedom of speech was restricted. Independent newspapers were silenced. Soon after, the Enabling Act gave Hitler the authority to pass laws without parliamentary approval, effectively ending German democracy. Within months, opposition parties were banned, labor unions were dissolved, and Germany became a one-party dictatorship. The Democratic Republic that had replaced the German Empire after World War I no longer existed. In its place stood the Third Reich, a regime built on absolute power, aggressive nationalism, and the promise of restoring Germany to greatness. For many Germans, it appeared that the nation was finally recovering. But behind the scenes, Nazi Germany was preparing for something far more dangerous. It was preparing for war. Chapter 2: The Rise of Nazi Germany. By the time Adolf Hitler had secured complete control over Germany, the country was changing at an astonishing pace. The Nazi government launched massive public construction projects, including the famous Autobahn highway system, creating thousands of jobs and reducing unemployment. At the same time, Germany secretly rebuilt its military in direct violation of the Treaty of Versailles. New factories produced tanks, aircraft, artillery, and warships, while young men were once again called into military service. To many Germans, it seemed as though their nation had been reborn. The economy improved, national pride returned, and Hitler's popularity reached unprecedented levels. Yet this recovery came at a terrible cost. The Nazi regime controlled nearly every aspect of daily life. Joseph Goebbels, the Minister of Propaganda, transformed newspapers, radio broadcasts, films, and education into powerful tools for spreading Nazi ideology. Every message praised Hitler as Germany's savior, while portraying enemies of the state as dangerous threats. Children joined the Hitler Youth, where they were taught absolute loyalty to the regime from an early age. Fear became another powerful weapon. The Gestapo, Germany's secret police, monitored citizens, arrested political opponents, and crushed resistance. Speaking out against the government could lead to imprisonment or worse. Concentration camps were established to detain political prisoners, dissidents, and others considered enemies of the regime. In the years that followed, these camps would become central to one of history's greatest atrocities. Hitler's ambitions extended far beyond Germany's borders. He believed Germany needed more territory, or Lebensraum, living space, to secure its future. Determined to reverse the post-war settlement, he began challenging the international order step by step. In 1936, German troops marched into the Rhineland, a region that had been demilitarized under the Treaty of Versailles. Britain and France protested, but chose not to intervene militarily. Their reluctance convinced Hitler that the Western powers wished to avoid another major war. Encouraged by this success, Hitler took an even bolder step. In March 1938, Germany annexed Austria in an event known as the Anschluss. German troops entered the country without facing military resistance, and Austria was absorbed into the Third Reich. Many Austrians welcomed the union, while others opposed it, but had little ability to resist. Only months later, Hitler turned his attention to Czechoslovakia. He demanded control of the Sudetenland, a border region with a large ethnic German population. At the Munich Conference in September 1938, Britain and France agreed to his demands, hoping that satisfying Hitler would preserve peace in Europe. The policy became known as appeasement. It failed. In March 1939, Germany occupied the rest of Czechoslovakia, proving that Hitler's ambitions extended far beyond protecting German-speaking populations. Europe now understood that another war was becoming increasingly likely. The final spark came on September 1st, 1939. German forces invaded Poland, using a strategy later known as Blitzkrieg, or Lightning War. Instead of slow trench warfare like World War I, Germany combined fast-moving tanks, mechanized infantry, artillery, and air power to overwhelm enemy defenses before they could react. The speed of the attack shocked the world. Just 2 days later, Britain and France declared war on Germany. World War II had begun. During the next 2 years, Nazi Germany achieved a series of extraordinary military victories. Poland fell within weeks. Denmark and Norway were occupied. In the spring of 1940, German forces swept through Belgium and the Netherlands before launching a surprise attack through the Ardennes forest into France. Many military experts believed such an advance was impossible. They were wrong. Within just 6 weeks, France, one of Europe's strongest military powers, collapsed. Paris was occupied, and much of Western Europe came under German control. Hitler now ruled over the largest empire Germany had possessed in modern history. Across Europe, many believed the Third Reich was unstoppable. Its armies had defeated nation after nation with astonishing speed. German soldiers marched through the capitals of Europe while victory seemed inevitable. But Hitler's greatest gamble was still ahead. In 1941, convinced that no power could stand against him, he made a decision that would change the course of history forever. He ordered the invasion of the Soviet Union. It was a campaign that would ultimately become the beginning of Nazi Germany's downfall. Chapter 3. The Fall of Nazi Germany. On June 22, 1941, Nazi Germany launched Operation Barbarossa, the largest military invasion in human history. More than 3 million German soldiers, supported by thousands of tanks, aircraft, and artillery pieces, crossed the Soviet border. Hitler believed the campaign would be over within a few months. He expected the Red Army to collapse quickly, allowing Germany to seize vast territories, valuable resources, and complete control over Eastern Europe. At first, everything seemed to go according to plan. German forces advanced hundreds of kilometers into Soviet territory, surrounding entire armies and capturing millions of prisoners. City after city fell, and many believed the Soviet Union was on the verge of total defeat. But Hitler had made a fatal mistake. He underestimated both the size of the Soviet Union and the determination of its people. As German supply lines stretched farther east, fuel, ammunition, food, and winter clothing became increasingly difficult to deliver. Roads turned into mud during autumn, slowing entire armies to a crawl. Then winter arrived. Temperatures dropped far below freezing. German vehicles broke down. Weapons froze. Soldiers who had expected a quick victory now found themselves fighting one of the coldest winters in decades with inadequate equipment, The invasion that was supposed to end the war instead became a long and exhausting struggle. The turning point came in the city of Stalingrad. For months, German and Soviet forces fought street by street, building by building, in one of the bloodiest battles ever recorded. Entire neighborhoods were reduced to rubble. Civilians and soldiers alike endured unimaginable suffering. In early 1943, the German Sixth Army was surrounded. After months without sufficient food, ammunition, or medical supplies, it surrendered. It was one of the greatest defeats in German military history. From that moment onward, the initiative shifted to the Soviet Union. While Germany struggled in the East, another threat was growing in the West. The United States had entered the war after the attack on Pearl Harbor in December 1941, bringing enormous industrial and military strength to the Allied cause. American factories produced ships, tanks, aircraft, and weapons at a scale Germany could no longer match. On June 6, 1944, Allied forces launched D-Day, landing on the beaches of Normandy in northern France. It became the largest amphibious invasion in history. Despite fierce German resistance, the Allies established a foothold and began liberating Western Europe. As they advanced from the west and Soviet forces pushed from the east, Germany found itself trapped in a two-front war, the very situation many of its military leaders had hoped to avoid. Meanwhile, Allied bombers carried out relentless air raids against German cities and factories. Industrial production declined. Transportation networks collapsed. Fuel shortages became severe. Even though German engineers developed advanced weapons, including the world's first operational jet fighter and long-range V-2 rockets, these innovations arrived too late to change the outcome of the war. By early 1945, the Third Reich was collapsing. Soviet forces surrounded Berlin, while Allied armies crossed the Rhine and advanced deeper into Germany. Entire cities lay in ruins. Millions of civilians fled the fighting, and German military resistance was rapidly disintegrating. Deep beneath Berlin, inside the Führer bunker, Adolf Hitler spent his final days surrounded by a small group of loyal officials. Refusing to surrender, he continued issuing military orders even as German defenses crumbled around the capital. On April 30th, 1945, with Soviet troops only a short distance away, Adolf Hitler took his own life inside the bunker. A week later, on May 8th, 1945, Germany officially surrendered. The war in Europe was over. The Third Reich, which Hitler had claimed would last 1,000 years, had survived for only 12. Its defeat left Europe devastated. Tens of millions of people had lost their lives. Countless cities had been destroyed, and the horrors of the Holocaust shocked the entire world. In the years that followed, many of the leading Nazi officials were brought to justice during the Nuremberg trials, where they were held accountable for war crimes and crimes against humanity. The rise and fall of Nazi Germany remains one of history's most powerful warnings. It shows how economic hardship, political instability, propaganda, and authoritarian rule can transform a nation with devastating consequences, not only for its own people, but for the entire world. More than 80 years later, the story of Nazi Germany continues to be studied not only to understand the past, but to recognize the importance of protecting democracy, human rights, and peace in the future.